visitors are likely to want to, and the legislation makes provision for that, they would want to change their identities completely. You know, sometimes it may even require surgical changes because, you know, unlike countries like Nigeria and even South Africa to a limited extent in the United States, we are not a federal state. We are a unitary state. We are a relatively small state. We may be geographically very, very huge, but our population size and also where people can go. You can just imagine if we had to keep witnesses at a particular location. Namibians, we know, most people know someone that knows someone. Yeah. So it's very difficult to protect them. So where we are now is that we have an acting director because, you know, only once we have gone through the recruitment process for the director himself or herself will that person now set up the staff complement, the unit, and get it functional. But we thought that for us to operationalize the witness protection unit, that means we must get somebody to start the process. And that's how we appointed our current Deputy Executive Director as the acting director to get the staff members to operationalize the directives and the regulations and kickstart the process. Find locations, for instance, for where this is going to have work. We work with auxiliary services to undertake also issues of vetting, because you can imagine that people must have trust in the individual that's going to be the director. People must have trust in the staff members that are going to be working. So there's going to be a vetting process, for instance, to ensure that people are not, you know, can be trusted with such a sensitive and important office.
Very well, very well. There you have it. A lot is indeed happening at the Ministry of Justice. I'd like to now welcome any media practitioner that's in the house who would like to pose a question to our panelists this morning. Anyone? Yes, Ohone?
Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity.
Maybe just introduce yourself and from which media house you are from, and then pose your question.
Okay, my name is Ohone Tlhage. I'm from the Namibian Sun. Minister, in your, you've previously mentioned that the Witness Protection Unit will require around about $160 million. You mentioned a figure of about $50 million. Although this is now only at its infancy, do you believe that that budgetary allocation that has been given is sufficient, and what interventions or what are you going to do in future to ensure that you are able to attract more financial support from the fiscus? And then secondly, you've touched on the issue of the extradition amendments to the extradition bill, and it brought to mind the current quagmire government finds itself in that it appears that persons identified in the fish rot saga from Iceland stand not to be extradited. Is this intervention? Do you believe this intervention is going to be enough to ensure that when foreign nationals commit crimes, there is enough scope to bring them to book in Namibia? And then lastly, alleged fish rot paymaster Marin de Klerk has made claims that his safety may not be guaranteed and so on. Do you believe that your ministry has worked proactively to ensure that Mr. de Klerk can be extradited to Namibia and answer for his alleged crimes? Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ohone, for that question. Any other questions from our media houses? Yes. There we have one last one, and then perhaps we give the Minister an opportunity to respond to some of those questions. Yes. Please go ahead.
Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity. My name is Jokonya Nehemia from Namibia Press Agency. So my question for Honorable Minister is the bill that was reviewed, Child Protection Bill. Does it also encompass corporal punishment regarding that there has been more occurrences of corporal punishment against children in Namibia? And lastly, I would also like to know, just a minute. Yes, the Namibian divorce law. So I just want to know what are some of the hiccups or challenges that has arise from this law, knowing that it was just recently reviewed last week. Thank you.
Thank you so much for those questions. Of course, we received questions from the Namibian Sun newspaper and the Namibia Press Agency. Minister,
Yes.
let me give you this opportunity to respond.
So thank you very much, Ohone, for your questions. So let me start with the issue around the Witness Protection Unit. The 50 million, the intention, at least on our part as a ministry, is to ensure that we deplete those funds during this financial year, so that the ministry does not say that we have not employed those funds properly. So it's really to set up the unit, to find office space, to find the infrastructure that we will require, make the institutional arrangements for where people will be placed. Because you can imagine, once this law becomes operationalized, all the institutions, particularly law enforcement, prosecution, anti-corruption, they will be expecting now the ministry to take over the responsibility of administering witness protection, of administering whistleblower protection in the country. We have delayed the finalization or operationalization of the whistleblower protection unit because we thought it's important for us to start with one, because you can't tackle those two important offices at the same time. I think the will on the part of executive is that those institutions become functional. And that means every year the Ministry of Finance, through us of course, during our budgetary request, must make provision for all activities related to witness protection. I don't believe that in the next 2 years we will require 160 million because we are still in the initial stages of setting up. But I think what we were saying is that to run a program like that, and it also depends on how many witnesses you get from time to time, and it also depends on the criminal activity in the country, because that impacts on how many witnesses you need to protect and those kinds of things, because it's also not every witness that may require protection. So we believe that is the parameter, financial requirements. For the moment, it is only Treasury that we can ask for those funds. And the commitment to do that is there. I do want to just indicate, Ohone, that I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about particularly the fish rot case because of where it finds itself. There is a lot of work that the Prosecutor General's office does in terms of, and there's a lot of activities that are happening in the background. So I cannot at this moment tell you what are the measures that we are taking specifically to address those issues, because they are sensitive. They will affect the work of law enforcement, you can imagine, because it's not only Namibian law enforcement that will get involved. Once something happens supranationally, in other words, outside the borders of Namibia, you are required now to engage Interpol, which is an international police organization, and some of those measures I'm unable, firstly, as a Minister of Justice, I'm not even privy to some of those activities because it's really not my responsibility in that way. Where the Ministry of Justice plays a role is in ensuring, as a central authority for international instruments and request and extradition request, is that we ensure that the paperwork is done. So when a request either comes to Namibia or a request goes out to other jurisdictions, the Ministry of Justice must make sure that we comply with the requirements that pertains to what kind of, how you should even bind the documentation that goes to the other country. So the request has been made to South Africa, so the Ministry of Justice has done its part in terms of ensuring that request goes to South Africa. What the jurisdiction that you request that information from does is really in many ways up to them, but it also depends on the kind of relationship that you have with your counterparts in South Africa, in this case, in respect of de Klerk. I don't want to deal with the issues that is reported in the media about Mr. de Klerk's safety and so forth. I think the issues relating to his safety issues that are not for public consumption at the moment, because you can imagine that it is sensitive. When you're talking about witness protection, you cannot really go into the details of what's going on. So I'm unable to respond to those concerns, but I think in terms of what we, and also just as a last point, you know, the Prosecutor General is the prosecutorial authority constitutionally when it comes to prosecuting crimes in Namibia. The Ministry of Justice and the Minister of Justice actually has no role to play except to facilitate the administrative portions that pertains to, for instance, extradition. But if the Prosecutor General takes a decision to undertake certain activities that relates to accessing and producing evidence that relates to the Fish Rod trial, I am, as a minister, not privy to those processes, and I can imagine even the Prosecutor General, if she was in the seat, would not have responded to that question, because she knows there are certain activities she is undertaking to ensure that she is able to prosecute, she's able to produce evidence, you know, in relation to the allegations that have been made against the accused. I will pause here and give my colleague an opportunity to maybe speak a little bit about those challenges that we may have been facing relating to divorce. But it may be useful, if I may, it may be useful for Ms. Chisholm to talk a little bit about, you know, why it was important for us to make the review. What were some of the key challenges people were facing for us to have come to a decision to review the legislation?
Indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you. First of all, I would like to mention that law reform, first of all, as a process, it's quite in-depth, and it involves intensive consultations. So that is also part of the reasons why you could say there has been a delay in finalizing this law, because we had to consider the views of all our stakeholders. For example, like the churches, they feel that marriage is for better or for worse, and whatever problems that you have, you need to sort it out peacefully and remain in that marriage. But we've also received complaints, and also, as you've seen in the newspapers, there are high cases of domestic violence, passion killing. People have complained that getting a divorce is expensive. Before I joined the public service, I was in private practice, and I dealt with a number of divorce cases, and I can tell you that to start a case, from the beginning to the end, it's not more than 25,000 Namibian dollars.
That's quite expensive.
Yeah. So I've had clients who said, okay, I rather just, wait it out. So those were some of the issues that we've had. And then also the issue of children. We also wanted to look at how do we deal with issues of child custody, access, and control in the best possible way that is for the interests of the child. And that is why we had to resolve all those issues. And as you're aware, we have the Child Care and Protection Act, which addresses all issues of child custody, access, and control. So once that act was in force, it actually helps us now to streamline the divorce bill. So those were just some of the issues, but really the high cases of domestic violence is what actually urged us to speed up this process, because we cannot force people to remain in marriages that are detrimental not only to their mental health, but to their life as well.
Thank you so much. Minister, I see you want to
Yes,
add?
I had forgotten to respond to the question from the media colleague from Nampa.
Nampa, yes.
So I want to respond to that. But I do want to just raise one more issue around the divorce question, is that apart from the fact that people stay in marriages where it is no longer safe for them to stay in those marriages, we've also seen a large contingent of individuals staying in marriages, moving away, in fact, from the marital home, not getting a divorce because they can't afford it, but then they actually, set up other families while they're married, and when one of the parties pass away, the marital spouse comes back to claim, and that also detrimentally sometimes affects other family members, children in particular. And, you know, we hope that this legislation will help people to when they have made a decision not to be together anymore, to get a divorce. But to just respond to two more questions, the first one that I want to respond to is corporal punishment was outlawed and has been declared unconstitutional. And, you know, until we change that, that is not going to happen. And when we're talking about corporal punishment, we are talking about public institutions. We are not talking about, you know, a parent disciplining their child, but also how parents discipline their children may be considered corporal punishment. Because if you beating your child with, you know, with a brick, or with something, you know, that is severe, that is no longer disciplining the child. That could amount to torture, that could amount to all sorts of funny things. We have seen in recent times, you know, the extent to which our children have been abused in their family homes. Remember, homes, family homes are supposed to be safe spaces for children, for people in those relationships, and it has just become extremely difficult in the context that we find ourselves, with the increasing number of fathers raping their daughters and so forth. You know, so that's so for the moment, no corporal punishment is allowed in public institutions, but disciplining a child is acceptable, but that discipline must be reasonable. We were specifically referring to the child justice, and that's really dealing with children in conflict with the law. And the idea is that we manage that process so that our children, particularly between the ages of, you know, 9 to 14 or so, you know, at least up to 18, because remember, the age of majority is 18 now in Namibia, 1/8. That means anyone below the age of 18 is considered a child. And what we did not want is that our children are getting into the criminal justice system in the normal way. Because you can imagine children are vulnerable, and at that stage, if they could be used to commit crimes and so forth. So we want to establish a system, you know, previously it was called the juvenile justice system, where children in conflict with the law are dealt with differently. You know, we are also thinking about things like community service, for instance, for children in conflict of the law. They must not be dealt with in the normal. There's a lot of involvement of parents, there's a lot of involvement of social workers, for instance, when you're dealing with a child in conflict of the law. This is an important piece of legislation, if you'd like, because it will help us really address some of these other socioeconomic challenges that our society faces. Because once a social worker gets involved, she would want to understand, why did this child commit a crime? So you don't want to have a retributive punishment type of approach to children in conflict with the law, and that's the intention behind the child justice law.
Indeed.
Thank
I
you.
think that is so relevant because today is the day of the Namibian child.
Yes.
So I think they're very happy to hear all this information of how they will be protected and so forth. I think we have come now to the end of our session, but just before we close it off, let me just give my panelists an opportunity to give us their parting thoughts. Maybe we can start with the Chief Legal Officer.
Thank you. No, thanks for listening, Namibia. And as I said in the beginning, please, we are here for you as the Ministry of Justice. We are here to address all your concerns, and we provide that safe platform for all of you. And as I said earlier, with regard to our third phase of obsolete laws, we really encourage you to come forth and help us clean up our statute books. Please, thank you.
Thank you so much for being here. Minister?
Yes, with the launching of our customer care, publications, we are committing to the public that we want to be better. We want to make sure that we hear what your complaints are. For example, we want to simplify, we want to improve how we deal with issues of legal aid, and that's why that review process is in place. We want to improve the situation around the Office of the Master of the courts, of the High Court, because we think those are important service delivery units of the Ministry of Justice. I just want to say as I conclude that there are other activities that we're undertaking. We're working on the Small Claims Court because that's part of our program on access to justice, and we are working on improving community courts so that we really bring the court system closer to the people. The other activities are we also working on a pro bono project, because we believe that legal services and especially legal representation is extremely expensive in Namibia, and we think if we can have some working arrangement with the independent legal profession to increase their pool of pro bono work, that we can have more people have access to legal representation. So those are some of the activities. I believe that we will use other platforms to continue to share with the Namibian people what the Ministry of Justice is doing, and we encourage the Namibian public to not be shy, to complain about concerns that they have, but also to help us on how they think we can improve and find solutions to the problems that we're facing as a Namibian collective.
Thank you so much, Minister, for giving us that update. As I said, we have come to the end of our session. This was the Cabinet Committee briefing sessions with a special focus on the Ministry of Justice in terms of their initiatives, programs, and projects that they are rolling out to the Namibian people. Of course, these sessions are always taking place on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays, where we have ministers, executive directors providing the much needed information. And particularly on this very important day where we celebrate the International Day of Access to Information. That's why the ministry and government by extension has really initiated the whole project to really bring you information about government so that you are not left out. From myself, Shokik and Jimmy, and the entire team, is goodbye, Namibia.